Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Albums this long take a lot out of me. And this album is The Seer, the latest LP from the longtime experimental rock outfit Swans. I've covered this band before on the channel, reviewed their last LP in 2010, which at the time was their first album in over 10 years. The band broke up in the 90s, ended up reforming in the 2000s, and there is a bit more information in that review. You can watch it. It's linked in the description box of this video. Now, truth be told, Swans' return to putting out studio records was not as exciting for me as it was for some other people. And not because I'm not a fan, I am. I just felt like Swans' last effort was a bit of a letdown, unfortunately. Kind of subdued and unadventurous for a record carrying the Swans name. There were a lot of very dark, folky sounds on this record, and despite the fact that the band has indulged in sounds like that before on previous records, I couldn't help but feel like this album was more like a Michael Gira solo LP. Or a record from another one of his side projects, Angels of Light, which wasn't completely surprising considering that a lot of the members in this current phase of Swan's career were previously collaborating with Gira on that project before he kind of jumped and did the Swans thing. I really just kind of came away from Rope to the Sky hoping that the band was just getting warmed up, and I feel like The Seer confirms that. The band is definitely kind of getting the ball rolling again on dishing out the sounds that I would normally associate with this band. You know, the noisy, experimental, awe-inspiringly weird, and challenging music that they're known for. Because they're really getting back to those longer tracks, those drones, just that overall strangeness that was so awesome about the later period of Swan's career, with loads of drones, cacophonous instrumentation, noiseescapes, and mind-numbing repetition. And of course, Michael Gira's very disturbing lyrics and abrasive sounds of all shapes and sizes. Rumbling, overpowering, overmodulated, shrill. Love that word. Considering the kind of music the band puts out, Swans fans are really the type of people who beg to be tortured and abused, and on this LP, Swans are happy to oblige. The most impressive thing about this LP overall, I would say easily, is the fact that Swans maintain such a high level of tortured despair for a majority of this 2-disc, 2-hour-long, very ambitious album, which I will start describing right from the beginning. I will try to keep my descriptions of tracks and musical moments succinct because I really do feel like I could talk for as long as this album lasts. Now, the opening track on the first disc, Lunacy, just has an amazingly hellish chorus on it. It is just bone-chilling. And the track actually features members of the band Low. I love how these chorus vocals just trade spots with some really heavy, abrasive instrumentation. It is the perfect opener for this thing. It kind of sets the stage for what you're going to get throughout the album. Some strange vocals, a little bit of organ in there, I believe some guitar, and some hammered dulcimer as well, kind of chopping it up in the mix. The next track, Mother of the World, has these really sharp, repetitive riffs on it, guitar riffs that play this very stuttering groove that is very unlike any groove I have heard in any sort of rock-inspired song. It's very attention-grabbing, and you can hear Michael Gira's vocal on the track, it's just heavy breathing into the microphone. It is just weird. Like, I listen to this track and other tracks on this album and just think, what are you doing? It's freaking me out, man. At first, I wasn't too impressed with this track, thought it was a little too repetitive. The groove itself is repetitive, but the band works to subtly build atmosphere around this groove. More instrumentation, just more sounds kind of fly in. Swans really do love repetition on this LP. I like the subdued outro on this track too, that it kind of breaks into after a really intense build-up. It's very mournful, very folky. Now the title track in the middle of this first disc is 30 minutes long, and it is surprisingly cohesive considering its length. However, this is not the first long-form song that Swans has written like this. The only thing that really kind of feels disconnected from the rest of the track is the very noisy drone that introduces the whole thing and then just kind of dies out before the real meat of the track begins. And the track features this really slowly building groove before Michael Gira's vocals just kind of get multi-tracked on top of each other, and in this very kind of chanting, repetitive, hypnotic way, he starts saying, "I see it all, I see it all, I see it all." Really strange, and the track builds into a very high, noisy, just ear-shattering climax. And right after that, it just kind of breaks into these syncopated hits of drums, guitar, just basically every instrument that Swans can muster, all crashing down over and over and over. I should also mention that there are some slower moments on this track that also kind of remind me of Godspeed, but I digress. Back to this crashing instrumentation. Though this point can seem especially repetitive, maybe the most repetitive point on the entire album, it can really kind of drag on, I'm sure, for a first-time listener. But every time you get a hit, you get a crash of instrumentation, Swans work to kind of make the dissonance qualities of these hits different, like subtly different. Either there are just different tones buried in the crashes, or they are just slowly getting more and more intense or altered as the track progresses. And I really like the dusty soundscape that finishes the track off. There's a nice harmonica in there. It's a really interesting, serene calm after the storm. The track The Seer returns features Jarboe on the track, coming back into the fold with Swans, although I found her vocal contribution on the song to be maybe a little too subtle. I would have loved to have heard her just more front and center. This track features one of the more straightforward grooves on the entire LP, and it could even be catchy and kind of easy to show people who don't know about Swans if it were not for Michael Gira's very freakish vocal delivery and narrations. This groove is jammed out with more intense energy as the track continues on. It's a song that I wish kind of came to more of an interesting climax, to be completely honest. I do think it's a little bit underwhelming because it doesn't really have a point B, really kind of just a getting loud, and then it's, kind of it. The track afterward, though, 93 Ave, that is totally the kind of mindfuck I go to a Swans album to hear. There are these wailing strings coming from all directions, and man, all the gaps between the sounds just keep getting filled more and more and more until things are just unbearably sharp and ugly. I love the deadpan chorus vocals on this track as well, and man, do things get loud and just I don't even have a f***ing word for it. It's so goddamn loud. Toward the end of this track, everything just all at once. It's like murder. It's sonic music murder. It is murder on the track. On the second disc, you get a nice little experimental folk opener that features Karen O on vocals. It has a very tried and true chord progression, very dusty. It has some very heavenly layers of indescribable instrumentation kind of popping in between some of her verses and ending the song off. It's, kind of a treat for anybody who's kind of made it through the album so far. Like, hey, here's a nicer track for you since you just sat through all that, The song Avatar after that has a nice groove, a cool chord progression, very nice instrumental progression, very escalative, not a word. Whatever. Maybe it is. I just made it up. It is a word. There's some really cool bells on the track, and I would really love it if it were not for the I'm going to say it, bad lyrics. Just bad lyrics on this track. My eye is in your eye. It's just like constantly just switching out words. It's like a fill-in-the-blank lyrical scheme that is just not interesting at all. But still, despite that, I would say the second disc is so much more solid than the first, more cohesive than the first, even with the two 20-minute tracks that end it, which at this point, should I even describe them in detail? I mean, if you've made it this far through the album and you're enjoying yourself, you're gonna like these two tracks. The first of the two tracks I kind of think of as being a short acoustic ballad that has a 15-minute long intro. The drone that starts this track off is very sound rich. I love the just multi-tracked hammered dulcimers that just, oh man, they just really just rock my brain when they pop in. It's very overwhelming. And the groove that pops in shortly after that, and the way it kind of, you know, coasts downward into something very kind of smooth and friendly and heavenly is nice. And the last track on here is just oblivion. It is just everything getting destroyed. It is just pure filth, ugliness, just, ugh, man, ugh. While I wasn't so in love with this LP at first, I was pleasantly surprised and very happy upon further listening to really get a grip of how frightening, how twisted, how sick, how dark, how just freakish, strange, unsettling, disturbing this album is. I feel like because of the length of the album and the repetition of some of the songs, that is not necessarily going to sink in on a first impression. And, you know, I'm also going to come out and say that some songs on here are, for some people, going to be unnecessarily long, pretentious, too experimental, just masturbatory. But it is because of that masturbatory nature that Swans has that they are just able to plunge their hands and just reach deeper and darker than a lot of bands can. And that's just all about, I have to say, about this LP. Really an album that is too large for words, to be completely honest. However, I don't feel like that means that this album is without its flaws. There are some underwhelming moments, you know, there are some spots that I wish had a bigger climax. There are some spots that I wish had a bit more instrumental variation. Still, despite my small gripes, this is an album that is deserving of the Swans name. I'm feeling a light, decent 8 on this thing. What did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And what should I review next? Anthony Fantano, Swans The Seer, forever.